Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture. We are back for another season, and I'm back in the saddle, and I have with me legendary Mike Barron. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, Andrew.
You know, I always love having you on because I think you're a voice of reason in a world of comics where we don't have any reason. And I think that you are doing what comics are supposed to do, which is tell good stories. And you have two great stories, Thin Blue Line, that came out a little while ago. And you have Private American, which is still, I think, available for pre-order, or I'm not too sure what it's called on Indiegogo.
If you want to find Private American, go to theprivateamerican.com. Theprivateamerican.com.
Yeah, it's in the description up above or down below or to the side, so you could easily click it there too, and I think it'll bring you, I think, to the Indiegogo, and I think that's still up, but I'm not too sure. So if it's not on Indiegogo, I'm sure you could find it elsewhere. I'm super excited for it, but I do want to catch everybody up on what is Private American, because I think it is a very topical book. I think it is going to be a great story because you know how to tell stories. And so what is the basic premise for those who are hearing about it for the first time? And then we're going to talk about a bunch of other fun stuff.
Can you show the video?
What'd you say?
Can you show the video?
Yeah, I could find the video in a second.
That does better job explaining what it's about than I do.
Cool. Let me find the video.
Really, but I mean, the video is highly entertaining. And we have the best videos in crowdfunders because Chris Brawley, who runs my campaign, is a professional videographer.
Cool. Let me just share it right now. Let me share my screen for everybody. 1 second, make sure it's pulled up. I think we can all see it, right? We can all see it.
Yeah.
America's southern border has become a war zone. Human traffickers, drug smugglers, and terrorists flow across the Rio Grande with impunity, secure in the knowledge that no one will stop them. A distant federal government lectures Americans on their privilege while punishing overworked Border Patrol agents who were helpless to stem the tidal wave of invaders and determined migrants. Second-generation Cuban-American Marcos Zamora is a military vet, more patriotic than most Americans. No longer able to ignore the chaos at his doorstep, he acts. Joined by his best friend Gus, they hit the border every night, saving lives while stopping violent drug cartels and other opportunists. The government reacts with fury at Marcos' attempts to preserve American sovereignty, deploying the full might of their enforcement agencies. But Marcos understands that the only thing the rich and powerful fear is bad publicity, and he records every encounter. Whoever he is, this Private American must be stopped. Illustrated by Richard Bonk and written by Eisner winner Mike Barron, Private American is his version of Captain America, and maybe a little Punisher, taking part in this ongoing, violent, and very real battle of good versus evil in the war for American sovereignty. Grab your copy at theprivateamerican.com.
We have a secure border, and that is a priority for our administration.
So I think the video played. Hopefully it did. I'm not very good at this. It's been a long day, but obviously it is a very entertaining video nonetheless. And yeah, so that's Private American for everybody.
Well, this came about because I asked myself, what would the Punisher be doing if I were writing him today? And it seemed obvious he'd be on the southern border trying to stem the flow of fentanyl, human trafficking, and terrorists who are pouring across the border to the tune of 220,000 a month. Last year, 120,000 Americans died from fentanyl poisoning. Most of them were kids. But when I set out to tell a story, my main goal is to entertain. This should not be a political topic. It should not be controversial. 10 years or 20 years ago, it would not have been. But in today's hyperpolarized climate, there are people who, for whatever reasons, despise the individual, human sovereignty, the principles on which this government was founded. And they have gone out of their way to try and destroy my career. They launched a campaign of lies on Daily Cause. The headline was, Mike Barron releases another racist AF comic book, another referring to Thin Blue Line, which they characterized as gangs of white cops going into black neighborhoods to shoot as many black people as possible. Nothing could be further from the truth. They never read Thin Blue Line.
So
They have
let's
no
actually
idea
talk about-
what's in it.
Oh, yeah.
And likewise,
let's even talk a little bit about this, because obviously I've read Thin Blue Line, and the way I viewed it is that obviously a riot breaks out, and then you have two police officers who want to get home. You know, I think one of them has a family, one of them might not. I don't remember the full details.
they both have families.
But they both have families, and then they're also trying to protect what I think is the mayor, if my memory recalls.
That's
And
right.
it's a story of how they're trying to get their person that they're supposed to protect home. They're trying to get themselves home. And it's kind of a crazy situation because you have to make choices, and
Right.
they don't want this issue. They don't want to deal with this riot because they just want to do their daily lives.
Hang on one second, Andrew.
Oh, take your time.
All right. I'm back.
Oh, you're good. You're good. And so, I mean, obviously that was Thin Blue Line, and then Private American is dealing with the southern border, and dealing with people coming in, and obviously dealing with both the people who should not be coming in and the government not being a fan of it because it's a very propaganda, very political, football-oriented topic. And so, what is this like to write a story that deals with today's age and the problems, and have those conversations and really start that conversation to some degree, but also tell not something that should be that controversial, and then be attacked for it? Because I think that's where this gets interesting. Is I don't remember the last person that was attacked extensively was Hart Fisher with his Jeffrey Dahmer book in a comic. Is the last person that I even see anything close to this, and I find it ridiculous that somebody would attack somebody over a comic versus writing their own book that tells the opposite side if they so choose.
Well, that's one thing about the internet. It's a blessing and a curse. And the curse part is it enables thousands of faceless trolls who live in their parents' basement to lash out at people they don't like for whatever reason. And we live in a highly polarized country now. And people carry enormous chips on their shoulders, and they have nothing better to do. But when I set out to write these stories, either Thin Blue Line or Private American, my first goal is to entertain. That's always my first goal. And that's what I set out to do. And that's what I do. I mean, it's an exciting, dramatic story that will grab you by the throat on the first page and drag you into the narrative to the exclusion of all else, which is what my goal is. And I think it should be the goal of everybody who writes entertainment. I mean, it goes without saying that their first job is to entertain, but that seems to have been lost these days, especially with the big two. I mean, you look at the product Marvel and DC are churning out, and you're just baffled. You ask yourself,
I mean, I'm
to
going to
whom are they appealing?
I'm going to challenge you on that. I don't think it's just the big two. I think there's a lot of problems in indie comics. I think there's some problems with image. I don't think it's just the big two. I think the art of writing and what is known as the page turn has been lost. And I think that what's happening in comics is that people say, cool, I need $6, maybe $7,000 to produce a comic book. And then they're not interested in selling the book. They're interested in pitching it to Netflix. And so they come to the idea of saying, I want the big money and I want to be a screenwriter. But they can't make it as a screenwriter. And so they say, I'll write a comic book and that's how I feel. And that's what I'm seeing. And I'm like, your book isn't that, not your book, but like their book, because I've read a lot of bad comics this last year. And this is how I see it. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm biased. I haven't written a comic book. I got enough things on my plate, but I think that's part of the problem is that they're using it as a pitching tool versus a comic. And the people who are writing comics, who are doing it and they know how to write a comic book, They're not quote unquote professionals. They're trying to do something else and use a comic to get their foot in the door. That's just my opinion.
To me, a comic is an end in itself. It's just another medium of storytelling, and it's what you make of it. Comics are the most forgiving medium on earth. Anybody can do a comic, and everybody does. But there was a great science fiction writer. His name was Theodore Sturgeon. And Sturgeon's law said 90% of everything is crap. And Theodore was right. 90% of everything is crap. 90% of the TV shows are crap. 90% of the movies are crap, and 90% of the comics are crap. Now, this isn't because everybody who sets out to do them doesn't understand entertainment. A lot of people want to entertain, and they're putting forth personal stories. They just don't know how to grab an audience. The most important question in fiction is what happens next? Because if the reader doesn't care, he's not going to turn the page. Well, how do you make the reader care? There are an infinite number of ways to how to make the reader care. But one of the most important is to give them a protagonist with whom they can identify and for whom they can root. They get interested in a character, and a lot of stories are just based on a thorny personality. And the greatest example I can think of is Sherlock Holmes. He's just fascinating. Everybody loves Sherlock Holmes. And the proof is that since the death of Conan Doyle, 10 times at least the number of Sherlock Holmes stories that he authored have been produced by other writers. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar has written 3 books about Mycroft Holmes that were inspired by Sherlock Holmes. There are probably 100 times as many Sherlock Holmes stories. And that's one method to get the reader to turn the page. Another method is to have a concept that is inherently interesting, like Jurassic Park. What if we were able to clone dinosaurs and create an amusement park? What could go wrong? Well, obviously, a lot can go wrong, and it's very entertaining because the Jurassic Park franchise has been around for 20 years. A third way to get the reader to turn the page is with a seductive narrative voice, a trail of words that's so much fun in and of itself that you just read the sentences because you dig the voice. A perfect example of that is Raymond Chandler, who created Philip Marlowe, the archetypal hard-boiled detective, and Dashiell Hammett at the same time, who created the Continental Op. Those 2 guys created the hard-boiled detective novel, and they did it with as much with their language as with the ideas that are presented. Raymond Chandler was a British author and a damn good one, lived in Los Angeles. But Dashiell Hammett was an authentic private detective, and he brought that knowledge to what he wrote, and it shows. And those are just a couple of ways about how you rope a reader in.
I mean, I find that Thin Blue Line just personally is such a compelling story, and it's a compelling concept, and it's also very relatable. I mean, I don't have a family yet, but I think if you have a family, it's the idea that what would you do in that circumstance? And you're saying, cool, are these people going to get out of this situation?
Yeah.
That's how I view Thin Blue Line. And also,
well, thank you.
I get it. It's also topical. And that's the other thing, too, is that I like to view something. I like to see a different viewpoint, and then I like to bring it up. And I like to talk about things with my friends. And you know what it is? I'm like, cool, maybe you want to read this. Maybe you'll have a different perspective. We could have a discussion about it. And obviously, I have friends from all different walks of life. And I'm very curious how a police officer would view it in a certain way. And I think it'd be a fascinating discussion. But that's how I view it. And I just find it crazy that it's being attacked. Because
I don't like to characterize people, but I think it's safe to say I was attacked by a vicious leftist, a purple-haired harridan who has her own comics that she's crowdfunding on Kickstarter, whom I've never heard of before, who went out of her way to try and destroy my comic. I mean, it's just mind-blowing. And the Daily Cost just printed it without checking anything. You think that a responsible magazine or journal would contact the subject of the story and say, we'd like to ask you a few questions. Can you verify this? No, they just ran it. And then she said, everybody write Kickstarter and get this guy kicked off. And they did. She's very successful with that. However, we're not taking this line down, and we're suing. In fact, I have a GoFundMe. And if you're interested, I've been posting it on social media, on Twitter and on Facebook. On Facebook, I'm the Comics and Novels of Mike Baron, as well as Michael A. Baron. And on Twitter, I'm at Bloody Red Baron. So check it out. Join the fight. We're not taking this line down. And I'm not doing this.
Talk about that because right now there's been a few lawsuits in comics lately, and we don't have to go into too many of them. But one of the things that I think has to happen is that I think there has to be consequences for actions. And I think that, the comic community, people said, look, I'm going to go create an alternative crowdfunder. I'm going to do that. And, not to say anything bad, but I think that's a tough battle because I think it's tricky to do that. And I think it's hard to do it correctly. I do. And Luke Stone just launched something, but I think it's tough and I think it's going to take a while. I don't think it happens overnight. And I think it's years long, if not a 10-year long process, maybe 5. But my whole thing is that I think it's important that if you have an issue where Indiegogo shadow bans you or Kickstarter kicks you off or a newspaper does something, you have to legally lawyer up and fight. And I think that's something that people have forgotten how to do, is that you have to defend your rights and you have to bring the fight to them. And you can't just let people get away with it because there's 2 arguments here. There's, I guess, the legality, but there's also how are people going to look at you socially. And I think that's the other thing too, that's very interesting, because if all of a sudden somebody brings a lawsuit, people say, I'm going to fact check the next time I'm going to challenge somebody that I disagree with, because
Andrew, my crowdfunder is called Mike Baron versus the Scum of the Earth. I hope you'll check it out and contribute if you're so inclined.
We're going to put up the link. I'll put the link in the description, definitely. But even going into further into that, because I think it's so important, because we hear all the time people saying, oh, I'm going to fight them and I'm going to bring them down. Yet you're actually doing it and you're attempting to do it. And I think that's where this is interesting, because I'm tired of people just talking versus action. And I think that's what needs to happen. If you don't like something, you either need to build something better and you need to go in with the right mindset, or you need to do something about it. And I think you're doing something about it.
Yes, and we've caught them in demonstrable lies. And we're getting a fair amount of publicity from this. TheFire.org did a big article about it. That's the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, which fights for student rights on campus. But they took an interest in our case, too, because it's similar. It's about these self-appointed gatekeepers trying to stifle the free speech of others. There's nothing malicious about what I'm doing. My goal is to entertain. It always has been. It just so happens that this is a hot button topic. It shouldn't be. 10 or 20 years ago, nobody would raise an eyebrow at this. But today we live in such an insane world that the people who've taken over this country seem intent on destroying it. No organism, neither a single cell nor a nation, can survive without controlling its borders. Even a child understands this. But the people who've taken over this country, largely because of their egos and their desire to get rich, seem intent on destroying everything that made this country great.
It's a very, very trying time in our country. And obviously, countries exist. There's parameters that a country needs a border. And, if you don't protect your border, that's what this is. And it's very interesting. It's very interesting. So obviously, yeah, and I think you're hitting the nail on the head, and I think that you're doing something about it. And obviously, Private American, despite being shadow banned, I think it's done like 66,000, around that number on Indiegogo.
Oh, no, we're at about 62,000. We're happy with that. We were hovering around 32,000 before the Daily Cross attacked us. And then because of when the word got out, our funding increased greatly. So they did us a big favor that way. We would never have reached that amount without their unwarranted attack. But we're not going to take this lying down. We're tired of living in a country that's turning into communist China. This country was founded on freedom of expression. It's called the First Amendment. and respect for the individual.
Yeah, I don't really get it. In which if that person had an issue with you, I mean, there's a concept called debate in the public square too, and I don't get that. If they didn't like your book, why don't they go build a book that is the exact opposite, and then just
Yeah.
beat you in the numbers if they think they're right?
Well,
I mean,
and, there's two types of people in the world. There's the type of person who's a proud, self-centered American, says if you don't like it, don't watch it. And there's another type of person who says, I don't like it, so I want it removed. I don't want anybody to be able to watch it.
yeah, there's those. They're definitely, and I think they just fear you. Is what this is. They fear you, and that's very interesting. And but even despite, I think they lost. All jokes aside, I think they lost because when you're doing 62,000, I'm sorry, on the private American, with it being shadow banned on Indiegogo, it is clear that this is something that people are interested in. People want to read it. People are excited for the story. They're excited for the concept. They know your reputation. They know you tell good stories. And even still, I mean, that's something that is, I think, showing that even despite all the efforts, this is still wanted. There's a market for it.
Oh yeah, and when people get it, they're going to love it because it's probably the best comic they're going to read all year.
And so I think that's something that's just really, really interesting with this. And I think it's brilliant. And I think you're showing that. Imagine if you weren't shadow banned, what this would do. I mean,
Well, I'm not complaining. The previous campaign, we raised over $100,000 for Thin Blue Line because we got some good publicity off of that. And after that came out, police officers contacted me from all over the country to thank me for telling a positive story about police officers. And I also learned that a number of police officers want to write and have written novels.
So what is that like? Because obviously there was criticism for Thin Blue Line as well. And what is that like to hear positive things from police officers?
Well, it
And
was very
hear,
gratifying. And one of the reasons I wrote is I know a bunch of cops. And we all know they're bad cops. But this isn't about them. And the cops I know join the force to be a force for good in their community. They honestly want to help people. And I've had experiences with them myself. Like when I came home and I found my late wife dead, they were nothing but sympathetic and helpful. She died from an overdose of OxyContin and vodka. It's a long story, but it was towards the end of a very bleak period in my life where I couldn't get any work writing. I took any job I could, including janitorial and unloading automobile bumpers. But after a while, after I had accepted her loss and was able to move on, I returned to writing, and I found that I understood story because I've been trying to write novels my whole life, and they were awful. And because of that, I say that every would-be writer has a million words of bullshit clogging up his system, and you have to get that out before you get to the good stuff. And by the time I returned to writing, I found that I had got it all out, and I was at the good stuff, which means that I understand story. And once you understand story, what constitutes story, you don't make a false step. So you're able to proceed with confidence. And when you release that manuscript to the public, you don't wonder if it's any good. You know it's good.
that's interesting. That's interesting. I mean, I know when I turn something in for my job and I'm writing a policy / theory on something on my company, and it's not ready to be released. But when I know that I'm circling the nail, but I know soon enough I'm going to hit it where I'm on the right track, but I didn't nail the nail into the wood yet completely. But when I do, it's all going to flow out and be like, I hit the nail on the head. And even when I know when I'm writing an interview, sometimes that I'm like, man, I know exactly how this interview is going to go. My last interview essentially for season 3 was a nearly perfect interview. And I knew how it was going to flow. And I was
Season 3 of what?
of this show, because we're on season 4 now. And I knew the last one I did for season 3 was just nearly perfect. It was like 53 minutes and there was only one mistake. And I will gladly challenge anybody to go find my one mistake in that interview. It was nearly perfect, just the flow of it. But like I knew when I was writing it how it was going to go. So I completely get it. And I'm not anywhere near you, not by any stretch of the imagination. I am very young in my writing career, if we could even call it that. But yeah, no. That's extremely prolific, though, nonetheless.
Well, if you're intent on telling a story, and this is good advice for everyone, sooner or later somebody's going to say, "What's your story about?" And when that happens, you have to be prepared. You can't hem and haw. And that means you have to write down a concise, exciting description of the story, the whole purpose of which is when the person is done reading it, he's going to set it down and say, "Yeah, now I got to read the story, or I got to see the movie. Where is it?" And that's the purpose of what is your story about. And I urge all would-be writers to practice that. And I do it before I write these days. I write an outline. And part of the outline is to entice readers to read the story. It's not just for my own benefit. Because once I get into the guts of the story, I invariably deviate from the outline. One of the reasons is that when you research a story, you'll find things you didn't know, which will open up new opportunities of storytelling. And another reason is that when you create a compelling character who's fully formed, at some point the character will turn around and tell you what he's going to do next.
Yeah. I mean, I think the best stories write themselves, or they should, if you have the right character. I'm a big Parker fan, and that sort of crime, detective stuff. And
he was a great writer, and he had that modern hard-boiled detective style down pat. We're talking about Robert Parker, right?
Yep.
Or we are talking about Robert Parker?
So I know Robert Parker, but I'm even just talking about the Parker novels. That Richard.
Oh, the Parker novel. Well, who wrote Parker? That's a different.
Was it Richard Stark? I want to say maybe.
Yes, I think you're right. And I think that was also a nom de plume that belonged to another very well-known writer.
Yes. It was like a pseudonym name, and I forget the other writer's name, but that style where Parker, the character, writes himself. He writes himself. He has to, because it's just so off the cuff and witty.
Yeah, it was Richard Stark. He wrote under the name Richard Stark, but his real name was Donald Westlake.
Yeah, I mean, I love the Parker stuff, and I could read a Parker novel, and like it just takes me away.
Yeah, he's very good, and there are a lot of guys working in that genre that are doing it very well.
And so, but I do know Robert Parker as well. And I'm not as familiar, but I know a few of,
Well, he wrote the Spencer novels, and they're real lean and mean too. He has that style down pat. And one of the important elements of that style is to show, don't tell. And that applies to straight prose as much as to comic books or movies as well. And it means that any information you can impart to the reader to advance the story without telling, you should do, and you do it in prose as well. And here's an explanation or an example. Is you'd say John stepped into the alley and a thug shot him in the back, or you could say John stepped into the alley. He was acutely aware of the reflection of the neon light and the oiled pools and the smell of garbage, when suddenly a Mack truck slammed into his back. And as he lost consciousness, the last thing he remembered was his cheek sliding down the red brick wall, scraping off granules. And then a warm pool of liquid formed in the small of his back. And it was only then that he remembered the loud report.
That's something else.
But also a hallmark of these hard-boiled detective novels is direct speech. They have shed the conventions of Victorian England, and they talk directly to each other, like "fuck you, no fuck you." I mean, and that, I suppose that's not the greatest example, but I've seen it written in hard-boiled detective novels like that. And if you want to know what I mean, just read Raymond Chandler or Dashiell Hammett.
No, I mean, I love it. And I love the direct speak. I also love like the broken English. I love the hearted English as well. And like just speaking like a normal person or speaking more on the street. It's just such a beautiful style. And I feel like it's so lacking in comics, where I feel like comics are now preachy to me. And I feel like dialogue is missed completely. Like people need to go back and say, hey, right now we're having a conversation, right? This is how I want comics. When Batman is speaking to Superman, I don't want it to sound like, Superman, how was dinner last night with Lois? That's not really that entertaining.
Right. They don't say the person's name every time they address them. And I have a rule in writing comics that keep the words to a minimum. Words are absolutely essential to a comic. I don't believe in wordless comics. They may be beautiful, but they don't leave an impression in the mind. It's those words that you parcel out like gold coins and you're on a budget, which is what I try to do. I try to parcel those words out like gold coins. I spend as few as possible and make them count for as much as possible so that the words are memorable and in context and original. My three rules of writing are: number one, entertain; number two, show, don't tell; and number three, be original. And you do that because we're all unique human beings. And when we write something, we bring our world experience and our impressions to it necessarily. But the other thing is to write fresh dialogue, to keep your ears open. And I would advise any would-be writer to carry a notepad and pen with him at all times and write down whatever catches his fancy, be it a name, a statistic, or a turn of phrase. Because when I hear a memorable turn of phrase that I've never heard before, I'm on that thing like a chicken on a locust, and I'm going to squirrel that way and use it when I can. And I'm only going to use it once. You got to keep coming up with fresh stuff. And it's okay to create your own language if it fits, if it doesn't draw attention to itself. And that's the most important thing, is not to jar the reader out of the narrative by disrupting his suspension of disbelief. And that means that within the context of that world, it has to be convincing. I'm at a place in my life where I only enjoy fiction if I believe it could actually happen. But that extends to well-done fantasy fiction too, because I love Alien and Aliens. I absolutely believe those worlds, because they take themselves seriously. And within those worlds, there are no false steps.
Yeah, see, I'm like in a different place as a consumer, where I don't need to watch something or read something if it can exist. I'm looking more at the human interaction with it. And so I'm watching, and I'm a big anime fan, I'm watching a death game anime. And what I like about it is that I don't think that random supernatural things and like a kingmaker is going to randomly kill somebody if they don't obey the law. What I think, though, is that it's the human interactions when they're faced with, do I obey or do I defy? And that to me is sort of the realism. It's not necessarily that all of a sudden this mystical force forces somebody to die in a weird way. It's, are they going to obey, and what's the rationale behind it, and how far does obedience go versus defiance? And it's so interesting because that to me is believable. And so I can suspend belief if we're actually diving into human emotion. And
well, that's a universal theme, what you've just described, to obey or to rebel. Have you seen the movie Snowpiercer?
Oh, I love that movie. It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, I mean, it's an absurd setup. It's about the future where the world is frozen over and all of humanity resides on this train circling the earth at the equator. And the rich people are all up front and the poor people are all in the back doing all the work. And the rich people are dining on lobster tail and steak, and the poor people are eating insects. Sound familiar?
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. But that's what it is. I love Snowpiercer. I thought it was a brilliant movie. I thought it was super smart. The show is interesting too.
Oh, I haven't seen the show, but I did enjoy the movie. But yeah, and it's one of those movies where the premise is silly if you think about it. But once you enter into it, it remains true to itself, and you can enjoy the story. You can enter into it fully. because it takes itself seriously and it takes the viewer seriously. Unlike Bullet Train, which I also enjoyed. I enjoyed it very much, but not for 1 second did I think it was real.
Yeah. I thought Bullet Train was entertaining, but it was far for me to suspend.
Right. All the clever dialogue, which was fun, all the quips. They're quipping while they're fighting with each other with swords and suitcases and whatnot.
But then again, you know, I love John Wick, and for 1 second, do I think John Wick is real and could happen? No, but is John Wick entertaining as hell? Oh my God, you could turn on any of the John Wicks and have a nice night. You know, that's all I'm gonna say.
Well, I gotta say, I think that like most of these franchises, the first one was the best, and then it gets progressively sillier, like The High Table. What is The High Table?
I mean, chapter 4 is just going to be fun. But then again, I'm going to go into that movie with my friends and we're just going to have a nice night.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to see it too.
And so I'm going to maybe sneak in some alcohol into the theater. It'll be great.
Be careful, Andy.
I'm a bad boy. I didn't say what theater I'm going to. So,
right. Well, your secret is safe with me.
And the rest of the internet here.
Don't make a scene. That's all I say.
It's all right. It's all right. You could plead the fifth. You're not in a conspiracy yet.
You can plead the fifth or you can drink the fifth.
We could do a little bit of both. But I think it's very interesting. I think you're just so insightful on this. And obviously, I mean, I'm thrilled that Thin Blue Line did well. I'm glad that Private American's doing well. I'm really upset about that Kickstarter thing because that's a shame. And it's very upsetting as a fan, to be quite honest, that a platform would not allow you to be on there because, again,
without even, and this was after they reviewed the program and approved it. And then just because some nasty social justice warriors are going to shriek, they're going to kick us off. However, we've ignited a movement. I mean, there's been a lot of press about this so far, and there's going to be a lot more. And people are upset and they're outraged with these platforms. And it's sparking a lot of change. We're looking at creating our own platforms. A number of us are, and some have already started. There's a brand new platform called Fund My Comic. That's what it's called.
That's Luke Stone's project.
That's right.
And look. I'm a strong believer that you need to build your own. You need to build your own platforms. But I think it's tough, and I think it's going to take a lot. And also, you know, I think it's going to take a lot of uniting. And I don't know how many people are so ready to jump off of Indiegogo, or if they're going to, you know, jump off of, you know, Kickstarter. And that's the real question, I feel, where you almost need, you know, the top people who from a lot of different sectors to come. Because I think what Luke did is interesting. You know, 2% is a lot better than 10%. But it's still tricky because
he's got a few teething problems, but he only launched this week, I think. So I'm sure he's going to get them sorted out.
Yeah. And also, I know he's got some personal stuff going on, with everything, and you know, I know some stuff's going on that he has some family emergency I think he's dealing with. So right now, it's not necessarily the top priority because, in reality, your kids, your wife, your father, your husband, they typically come first, and they should, hopefully, for most people.
Yep. And that's the natural order of things, is that your family comes first, then your friends, and then your city, and your county, and then your state, and then your country, and then the rest of the world if you still have any energy left.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's simple. You know, if you have a business, that usually comes first. You know, usually it's my family, possibly my friends, then my business, or my family, then my business, then my friends, things like that. But I agree completely. But obviously, I mean, you got a lot of other stuff going on too, with some other stuff too. I mean, obviously, Private American, 62,000. I'm hoping that it's going to stay in demand as long as it can, because I think it's a great thing. I'm glad that it was canceled on Kickstarter. I'm glad that I got to pick it up still on Indiegogo, and I'm very thankful for that because I'm not the only one. I know Pops was very upset about that on Crowdfunder because they also did something. I know that Kickstarter, basically suspended it, which was crazy. I've never had a project get suspended on Kickstarter. And I was like, what's this about? I mean, it's very upsetting. It's very upsetting. As a backer and as a supporter of Kickstarter, I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm caught in a tough position because I want to back a lot of projects on Kickstarter that I think are great, but I also don't want to support that business practice.
I understand. Well, hopefully you're going to have some alternatives pretty soon.
I'm hoping the projects that are on Kickstarter also come over with the alternatives, because that's the biggest issue is that I just backed Mount Olympus's project and it looks fun, it looks cool, but like I don't know if they're going to be coming over to the other side or to another platform or to a Zoop or to an Indiegogo, and that's the real question. Is that unfortunately sometimes people only come over to one platform, but I digress. There's only so much I can control here. Guys, build me better projects. That's all I'm going to say.
Me too.
But I do want to talk about what's coming out next with you. Obviously, back the Private American on Indiegogo. The more backing it gets, the more things get unlocked, the better the book becomes. The longer it becomes, the nicer stock it becomes. I know there's 3 different things. What is it? $25, I think. For
Well, next stop, Andrew, is Bronze Star.
Yeah, I'll pull that up. I was just hyping the Private American. That's what I was hyping. Is that I think what is it, like $25 for all
$25 for the book, and it's worth it. Why should you pay $25 for a 66-page comic? Because it's an unforgettable story you're going to read over and over again. It's not like the other 90%.
Honestly, I was going to even make an even simpler argument. It's indie comics, and it's a good book, and that's what it costs, and that's the end of it. I don't really think that people charge $25 for a 22-pager now on Kickstarter. People charge $15, and I don't think it's that outrageous to charge $20 to $25.
There is such a thing as value for money, but I think that I have a track record, and my work is out there, and people who are familiar with it know that they're going to get a great story.
Look, I know what I'm worth and I know what I charge. And if you can't afford me on certain things, that's that. And if you don't find value in what I do, that's fine too. You don't have to buy it. It's just that I don't have a problem spending $25 for your book because let's be realistic. I mean, I could go to Barnes & Noble and spend $18 for a really, really shitty Marvel book tomorrow. Your book isn't that much more expensive and it's not that much less page count. So at the end of the day, what are we trading? An apple and a half for an orange? Like seriously, like it's at this point, it's $25. If it was $300, that'd be a different discussion. But I digress. We could talk about Bronze Star, which is this.
This is the greatest work of Pat Broderick's career. It's unbelievable. And he says so. I mean, he knows it because the reason we did this, I said, Pat, what do you want to draw? I said, well, I want to draw a supernatural Western. I said, all right.
So what is this about? Because I don't know much about this one at
all. It's about a former Confederate soldier named Harley Thronson, who inadvertently kills a card shark in a fight, who drew on him first. But the card shark was the son of a very powerful rancher who's willing to pursue Harley to the ends of the earth. And Harley flees to the United States and ends up in a tiny town, a mining town at the foot of the Rockies in Canada called Cobb's Gap. And Cobb's Gap is very, very peaceful after dark. And the reason it's peaceful is because the sheriff is a werewolf. But that's not the main supernatural element. And that's all I want to say about it for now, except that it's an exciting story. If you love Westerns, you're going to love it. I do my research. Everything in it is real. The Civil War references, but mostly I create fully rounded characters in which the reader can believe.
That actually sounds really interesting. See, now I want to know why it's peaceful at night. And now,
Because
now I'm curious. See, now the curiosity of me is like, okay, where are we going with this? If it's not because he's a werewolf at night, and also like I got like 14 questions now. It's like, okay, why is it peaceful? Is it peaceful during the day too? Like, yeah, I have all these
it's
questions.
less peaceful during the day, but it's very peaceful because the sheriff rules the town with an iron hand. He doesn't book any malfeasance. You know, if he catches you, he's going to smash your face in the dirt if you're misbehaving. I mean, not for a parking violation. They don't have parking violations. But at night, when the cowboys start drinking and start fighting in the saloon, he'll take care of business. And once a month, for 3 days, he's missing. But every now and then they'll find the remains of a human being shredded on the outskirts of the village.
It's so interesting. Like again, see, this goes back to now you've enticed my interest. And this is the thing that like I think comics also misses to some degree is that pitch me, right? Like one of the things as an interviewer that I hate is when people ask, hey, I have a comic coming out in a month on Kickstarter. Can I be on your show? I'm like, what's your book?
What's your story about?
So even tell me the name of your book. Like people just ask, and I'm like, I can't say yes or no because you've given me no information. Like pitch me. So like you go on a job interview. So he says, why do you want this job? Or why do you think you're a good fit for this job? You know, you should have a good answer. You should say, I'm a good fit for this job because I did A, B, C, and D here. And I think that translates over to these skills. And now you're selling yourself. Like now you just sold me on this book a little bit. And now I'm going to be like, when it comes out, I'm gonna be like, I'm probably going to buy it because I want to know what the hell's going on in this town, in this area. And I'm super excited because if the key is that it's not a werewolf story, but there's something else in play, what's that other thing in play? And what did this guy stumble onto or not stumble onto? Or maybe it's a happy ending. I don't know, but I'm curious now. So I'm excited. I want to read this. When's this coming?
Well, I think we're going to announce, we may announce at the end of January, certainly in February. Pat is almost done with the art. He penciled and inked everything himself. I sent you another page. If you can show that, it'll give people an idea of the level of detail. Yeah, there it is. That's the sheriff in the second panel.
Yeah, because I'm now like really interested, and this is the thing is that like this is why like I'm like getting frustrated with crowdfunders in general is that I feel some people don't even know how to like hit the story. Like if you just wrote that on your campaign and you wrote it in 2 sentences at the top of your Kickstarter or your crowdfunder or your Indiegogo, and for anybody, and you wrote something that's 2 sentences that's compelling, I'd be like, okay, I want to know more. I'm interested. It's going to make me stop. And you put the right image there. I mean, you're going to get backers. And like, but because I know what I'm going to be buying, and you also piqued my interest and curiosity. But it does look great. I actually like this art style.
Yeah, it's terrific. And then we're following that up with the second Florida Man graphic novel, which is twice as funny as the first. That's a cover by Pat Broderick, too. It's called Hogzilla.
Yeah, so let's even talk about Florida Man 2 because there's a lot of stuff. Not Florida Man 2 like the second one, but it is the second one, but Florida Man as well. I realized that my words sounded perfectly. But what is this like too? Because Florida Man is, I don't want to say crude, but funny and adult. I wouldn't give my 7-year-old, if I had a 7-year-old niece, Florida Man so quickly. It's my point.
Well, they're based on my novels. There are 3 Florida Man novels. They're all up on Amazon, and I was inspired by every time I went online or looked at the news, there was another Florida Man story, and some of them most of them were pretty low class. I mean, Florida Man claims syringe found in rectum is not his. Florida Man arrested for defecating on traffic from light pole. And a lot of bathroom humor. And while there's a little bit of that in Florida Man, I try to observe the hierarchy of humor, and the highest form of humor is absurdity. It's when we laugh at stuff because it's so outlandish. And there's a lot of outlandish stuff in Florida Man, and a lot of it arises out of Gary's personality. His name is Gary Duba. He's a redneck. He lives in a trailer down by the swamp. He's been in and out of trouble his whole life. He's got like a minor string of arrests, drunk driving while intoxicated, failure to support child, stuff like that, that he's got a heart of gold, and he give you the shirt off his back. And it's about his adventures as he goes from rags to riches, to rags, to riches, to rags, to riches. And Gary's always looking for the next get rich quick scheme. And like one of them is, you may know that iguana are one of the many invasive species that have taken over Florida. And when it gets cold, when there's a cold snap, the iguana go catatonic and they fall out of the trees. And Gary starts gathering them up for his restaurant, Lizard on a Stick. But he gets shut down the first day when a couple he has down there get in a screaming fight, and they insult the chef, and the chef comes out and beans the customer, and then the police come. So he loses the restaurant. But then he wants to do something for the good. He wants to feed the homeless, and he learns of a charity called the Nuns of Gavarone, and they run a homeless shelter where they feed the homeless. So he gathers up hundreds and hundreds of dead iguana, and he and his best friend Clyde drive to the Nuns of Gavarone on Christmas Eve and say, "We'd like to give you these iguana." And they say, we can't take these iguana. We can't take these iguana. Take them over to the Church of Scientology in Crystal Springs. They'll take them. So they go over to the Church of Scientology. Of course, it's not called that, but it's obviously what it is. And they're drinking the whole time. And by the time they get there, they're completely stoned. And so they're in the back of the truck. They're both wearing Santa Claus uniforms, shoveling dead iguana out the back of the truck. A security guard comes out and says, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" He says, and they go, "Ho, ho, ho, Santa wants to feed the poor." And they're shoveling dead iguana out. I mean, that's one of the things that happens in the book. It isn't in the graphic novel, but the stuff that's in the graphic novel is just as funny and just as outrageous.
I love absurdity. One of my favorite books is by Carl Hansen, and it's Razor Girl. And Razor Girl is one of the best books I've ever read.
Do you mean Carl Hiaasen?
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of people have compared Florida Man to him. So I bought a couple of his books and I've read them. And he's a very good writer. He's very entertaining. But compared to my Florida Man, his books are very subdued. I mean, mine are outrageous.
I thought Razor Girl was pretty good. I thought
I'll check it out.
I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I had the opportunity to get a Razor Girl copy signed, and I foolishly didn't. And it's a mistake I probably will make regret for a while. But I really like the way he writes. I like the fact that he's from Florida, and he was like a journalist, and a lot of his stuff actually comes from that, because I think it's a nice touch when you have journalists writing it, much like when a police officer writes a novel about a crime. It's kind of firsthand experience.
Well, he was a reporter for many years.
Yeah. So
shows.
Yes. Oh, I just love his books. I love his books, and he's, as you said, he's a good writer, and I thoroughly enjoy it because I can just sit down. It's like a Parker novel. I can just escape. When a writer allows me to escape, it's a really nice thing, because not every writer can do that. And I got a lot of things going on in my life, and so does everybody else. And it's nice when you can just jump into something, and then you're like, your problems disappear, even for 20 minutes. It's amazing. And it's a real skill to make things like that disappear and problems disappear. And then you come back to your life and you're like, fuck, they're still here. But anyway, I digress. But I read your Florida stuff with the comic. I have one of them, bought it in previews. And I enjoy it. I think it's funny.
Thank you, Andrew. Great. The next one's going to be twice as funny. I promise.
And then I know that it actually went into second printing, which is nice too. It's good when comics go into second printing.
Well, we split the graphic novel up into 3 floppies, which were distributed by American Mythology, which is a comic book publisher, and it was their top-selling title ever.
Yeah, no, I just think it's always a healthy sign when a book goes from a first printing to a second printing to a third printing. And I just saw it because I was just ordering comics maybe like a month and a half ago that it was a second printing order. And I'm like, that's good. That's good. That means that the comic is doing well. And it means that people want this book and that the publisher doesn't want to just wants to actually distinguish between a first and second printing, which I like too, which I appreciate as a collector because I want to be rewarded for picking up it first. So that's how I feel. But anyway, I thought it was good. I enjoy it. It's funny. It's absurd. It's great.
But thank you for having me on, Andrew. I got to bail.
Oh, before you do, where could people find you, bother you, hit you up, social media, private American?
I'm on Twitter at Bloody Red Baron. I'm on Facebook at The Comics and Novels of Mike Baron, and also Michael A. Baron. I'm on Substack as Mike Baron, and I'm at bloodyredbaron.com, which is my website.
Well, and then I'm just going to say this, and then I'm going to let you get out of here. You need to support and financially support what you like. And so you need to financially support Mike Baron and what he's doing in comics. Obviously, the GoFundMe, I think it is, to fight that lawsuit and legality stuff.
Mike Baron versus the Scum of the Earth on GoFundMe.
So you need to, if you can, support that. Also pick up a copy of Private American. It's a great book. I'm super stoked for it. I know it's a good book. I didn't read it yet, but I know it's a good book. And obviously that's on Indiegogo. So I have the link for that up above because I think it's still shadow banned. And then if you want Thin Blue Line, you know, it's not that hard to find. If you type in
thinbluelinecomics.com.
There you go, right there. You know, obviously check that out. And yeah, that's everything. And then all my social media is down below. It's Pop Anime Comics on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. I appreciate people supporting me. And I'm going to give you the final word before I let you get out of here.
Always take a hat.
I couldn't have said it any better myself. And that is a wrap, everybody.
Thank you.